One of the things that I've got that I've always been fascinated about, and I've never asked you this, is your background in terms of your family. Now, are you part of the royal family or not?
Not the English one.
Not the English one.
No, no, no. No. I am. My mother is from Thailand, and that side of our family is related to the king of Thailand. Would be my great great grandfather, if you like.
Wow.
So actually, the king made famous in that movie, The King and I. Not Yul Brynner, the actor, the actual king he was playing. That great story. So yeah, that's so. But he had a lot of children. He had a very very big family. There are a lot of people who can make that claim.
Okay.
But yeah, no, no. I'm my mother's from Thailand, and it's a very important part of my life, particularly now. Really, I'm very proud of this mixed race heritage and how it defines me and what I'm all about. And it's obviously a subject of some interest now. People, thinking about multiracial societies and trying to get more diverse workers in the workplace. So that side of my family and how it affected me growing up is, it's been very, very important to me. And so, that's all very interesting for me. What's bleeping here? Is it you? Am I
No,
bleeping?
that's you.
Can you?
I think those are Apple sounds. I'm not an Apple person.
Does that screw up the recording?
No, no, no. It's okay.
Oh, you can't hear it then.
No, I mean
Okay.
I can hear it, but it's not a huge
Okay. Sorry.
issue. So
Yeah.
don't
Anyway. Yeah.
worry about it.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you didn't grow up in Thailand though. You were born in the UK.
Yeah. I was born in Surrey, just south of London,
Whereabouts?
and
I lived in Surrey for a period of time.
did you near
Yes,
a place called Farnham?
I know where
Or
Farnham is. I went to college in Guildford actually.
did you?
Yes, I went to so I'm not going to go into it now because this is about you. But I when I made the choice to study car design, I had to do a foundation course, and I did that at Guildford
Yeah.
College.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
All right. So
I live.
we were in Farnham. I was born and bred in Farnham, and very fond of that place, and that's where I grew up, and you know, when I was younger, you couldn't just hop on a flight and go to Thailand. You had to go via Rome, Cairo, Delhi, Bangkok, and it was a really big deal, and it cost a fortune as well. And so I didn't go to Thailand until I was 17. Me and my three brothers, that was sort of a rites of passage when you got to be to 17 and you'd finish your A levels, 17, 18, you got to do a few months in Thailand with the Thai side of my family. But I grew up with all my Thai cousins in Surrey, and it was really really nice. A lot of them came over to school in England, and they'd stay pretty much the year.
Wow.
They didn't go home like these rich foreign students do these days at half term. They had to
And
stay
did
the
your
whole
mom
year.
speak fluent? Sorry, did your mom speak fluent Thai? Did she speak only Thai to you? That was the question.
She tried, but it's one of those things, when you're a kid, you don't, yeah. So my Thai's pretty poor, really. I do understand a lot of it, but I'm not very good at speaking it.
But is that mainly from your visits when you go now, or from?
No, no, no. It's my mum. My mum used to speak Thai to me all the time, and still does now. So
Wow,
yeah,
interesting. And your dad, I read that he worked in the National Gallery. Is that right?
yeah. So my father, he was actually a chemical engineer. So he worked very briefly at ICI, but majority of his life he worked for the National Gallery in London. And above the National Gallery, they have a huge laboratory, a network of laboratories restoring paintings and looking after artworks.
Wow,
And he's pretty much he was the world authority on what's called the museum environment, so all heating, lighting, humidity. And he used to fly all around the world, be it Mexico, Australia, Persia, looking after all sorts of artworks, whether it be paintings or statues in Rome, cave paintings in Australia. He used to just be a world authority on maintaining, artworks and making sure they weren't destroyed by pollution, humidity, excess lighting or heating, and that's what he did. And he wrote a book which is still very much the Bible for such things, called The Museum Environment.
wow, Fascinating. Well, how was he? He wasn't the guy that was actually doing the like restoring himself. Was he making sure
No,
that?
no, no. He was a scientist. He was a scientist, and
Wow,
that's what he actually did.
that's amazing. How did he
So
get into that? Do you know?
he did chemical engineering at Cambridge, I guess, and then he worked at ICI briefly. But no, that was him. Most of his career was at the National Gallery, and he's awarded a Queen's Award, a CBE for his time there.
Jesus,
So that was
Julian.
very much his life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, what a special start. So did he have a creative streak at all?
Yeah, I mean, he just made us draw. He made us draw. We were always all. I had three elder brothers, and we were just told to draw and draw and draw. I guess a lot of people push their children into doing music, but we were always pushing to doing art. But unusually, he didn't really believe that you could teach art. He all thought that art was something you had from birth. You had that in you and a natural talent. So he never he didn't encourage to do art at school. So I never did art O level. I never did art GCSE. I never went to art school until I went to Royal College of Art. He didn't believe that. He thought art students and teaching art was a bit poncy. He thought it was it was a God-given gift. You had it or you didn't have it. So he'd always encourage us to draw, and that's what I did. I just drew a lot, and I just draw cars a lot. Right from an early age, I just always just drawing cars.
And was that just
And
something that you were interested in, or was the family into cars as well?
No, no. I mean, my dad was just not into cars at all, and neither was my mother really. You know, we just had the worst cars. My dad drove around in a Bedford van. We had a big family and stuff like that. He would have bought a Renault Espace or a Ford Galaxy had it been invented, but there wasn't such a thing. So we just had a van with loads of seats in it, and my mother had a minivan originally, and then we had a Mini later on. But that was these cars were sort of very much the embarrassment of on the school run to me. So
So
he just wasn't.
was studying. So then was studying design. Was that a hard sell?
Yeah, because you got to go back. I know, I know this talk is going to make me sound like a really old
No,
geezer,
but you
so
do
I'm
it.
always a bit
Do it.
nervous. But there was no internet. There was no there wasn't. You couldn't find out about car design. You could go to your teacher, ask them, or you could go to the careers department, or you could go to a library. But no one really knew about how to get a career in car design. And you got to remember, it's a really really small part of the industry, really. If you go back to the formative years, if you like, when I was doing this stuff in the 70s, cars were designed by Italians mainly. They were the world over. Companies like BMW, Volkswagen, Renault, Peugeot, they all used Pininfarina, Bertone, Giugiaro, Ghia, all those companies. Italians designed cars and no one else did. You got to remember that, back even in the early 80s, places like Volkswagen didn't really have much of a design studio. It was all done in Turin. So, there would have been car design studios in the UK. There would have been a bit of Jaguar. There would have been a bit of Leyland, but they're very engineering-led environments, and the really stuff, really real flair, artistic, was done in Italy, really. I mean, of course, there's obviously beautiful Jaguars coming out and stuff like that, but they were done by aerodynamicists and engineers predominantly. So it's a very, very different world. So finding out about car design was very, very difficult. I still carried on drawing cars, all the time, and very much to the detriment of my school studies. My school exams were terrible. But then my father used to have this gallery in the house where we all put up drawings and paintings done by the children and stuff. And one of the dinner guests we had one day was a guy called Wilhelm Corren. And he was a furniture designer at the Royal College of Art. I would have been about 15, 16. And he had actually worked at Rolls-Royce and Bentley years ago. He'd done a very famous Bentley Continental in the 50s. And he saw my drawings and said, "Oh, these are really good. You should talk to the Royal College of Art," a guy called Nigel Chapman. And I contacted Nigel and sent him my drawings, and he just sent me a letter telling me that the route into car design was this. You need to do this at school. You need to then either do engineering or industrial design, and then you can go to Royal College of Art. And that's the pattern I then tried to follow.
Did this encounter with Wilhelm, was that the moment where you realized that car design was a thing, or did you know that already, but you just had questions about it?
I sort of knew it was a thing. I mean, I guess I'm trying to think when I would have got. There was, you could, if you were really clever, you could get hold of a copy of Car Styling or Style Auto, but I never really understood, I never got those until I was about 17, 18. But by then, the other thing I did, I entered a car design competition in a magazine called Motor, which later became Autocar. And in that competition, there was loads of designers you might know. People like Tony Hatter took part in it as a student. Mark Adams was part. He won this children's section. David Wilkie was in there. A designer from Rover called Graham Thompson was in there. So there was this competition. It was to design an MG for the 90s, it was called. And I, with my very early marker renderings, I entered this competition, and I got a highly commended article on it. And through that highly commended entry, and through that I met another guy who's one of the judges called Tom Carron, and he ran a company called Ogle Design, which was in north of England. And he's best known for designing the Bond Bug. You know what a Bond Bug is? It's a little three-wheel triangular car. They're always orange.
Yes.
And you know what a Bond Bug is?
No.
Anyway, he designed another car called the Reliance Scimitar, which was a car which Princess Anne drove.
I know that.
Okay,
yeah.
So he drove that, and he did lots of work for trucks as well. So I got in touch with him, and he was very helpful as well. Helped me along doing that as well. So that was good. And I think at that point I would have been 17. And then when I was 18, I went into study engineering, because my dad still didn't. I did try to enter St. Martin's School of Art. So I had an interview at St. Martin's, and I turned up at St. Martin's to do industrial design with a portfolio full of car drawings. And I did sort of the morning interview session, and they looked at my portfolio and said, "Well, this is no good. You need to go and you're no good for industrial design. You need to go and do foundation like you did." And they said, "There's no point in taking part in the second half of the interview day. Go home now."
Jesus.
So they sent me away. So I then went to did engineering at Hatfield, and through that, that was a sandwich course like you did at Coventry. We had to do internships, and I got an internship first of all in a garage, but it was actually a Ferrari garage. I was a T-boy at a Ferrari garage for the first 3-4 months, and then I got a internship at Ogle Design, the company where Tom Carron headed up that, and it's there where I met real designers, if you like, real car designers, and just introduced that Royal College of Art fraternity. And then suddenly I did have marker pens, but I didn't really know how to use them, and literally someone shows you how to use a marker pen and to use its chalk and how to do his layout pad, and that's in day one. And I said, "Oh, that's how you do it." And then I could draw, like proper renderings suddenly overnight. And through that, they helped me put forward a portfolio for Royal College of Art, and that's when I got into Royal College of Art.
And what did Dad say at that point? Was he then like convinced that this might be a thing for you?
Oh yeah. I mean, they were always very, very supportive. He just didn't know about it. He didn't know it was a black art. No one really knew about it. And it was the Royal College of Art hadn't been going really that long. It must have been going for about 10 years when I joined it, I guess, something like that. So it was pretty young. I think Coventry as Lanch Polytechnic was up and running, but I didn't know about it. Otherwise I would have gone there,
Okay.
I guess. But what had happened? I'd carried on drawing cars just as a hobby all the time, just drawing cars. I was car mad millions of car magazines, car posters stuck on the bedroom wall. And I just carried on doing that like crazy. And all my exam grades and all my school studies were appalling. I just flunked everything, really terrible. And so by the time I got to Royal College of Art, I was really quiet and shy and really lacking in confidence academically. But then I just sort of produced this, load of car drawings. I didn't know how good they were. I had no idea. I just presented them. And you would have had a panel from Chrysler, Ford, and what would have been Austin Rover at the time. And I heard many years later from the student rep who was on that interview that they all ended up fighting over me. So he was this little kid who just doing these drawings of timid like this, and apparently it was really good. And and then suddenly, from being a sort of student who couldn't understand anything, couldn't relate to schoolwork, couldn't do anything, failed everything, I was suddenly just drawing cars and happy as anything, and everyone thought they were great. So that, it was a dream come true going to Royal College of Art. It's fantastic. And I was sponsored by Ford at that point as well.
My God, that's incredible. And what's also interesting though is the fact that you somehow didn't do great in school, but you still were able to go on to study engineering, which that must have been quite a challenge as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty bad at it, to be honest. I couldn't, I had my head in the clouds. I was a dreamer. I was just drawing cars.
But you got through it, though.
Yeah, eventually. It wasn't easy, but I got through it. Yeah.
Do you think that like kind of that was probably a very useful thing to do, though, in hindsight, in terms of understanding how. So, yeah. The technicalities of the job, which a lot of us that go through like a more artistic avenue don't. They somehow, it's missing somehow.
Yeah, I've never claimed to be a good engineer. I probably learned a lot more about engineering and actually being a car designer than I did at college. But I guess that background is there, that mathematical, analytical side of it, and so I do have a very basic engineering knowledge, and I do joke to engineers I work for, I said, well, I'm a qualified engineer too, so it never really works, that line. So.
And then your first job then out of RCA was presumably Ford.
Yeah, it was again, Sam. It's very difficult, very very different time, because how many art schools are there now? Doing car design around the world.
So many.
There's got to be 50, 40, 50, I don't know, something like that. And how many, so what do you reckon, how many students? Maybe 40 out of each, you're talking about thousands of car design students
at least. Well, Coventry's doing at least 200 of those a year, so.
Yeah, exactly, a week. So, but back then, Royal College, in my year, we had 6 graduates. And then Arts Centre was doing about 15, about 12, 15, something like that, and that was it. That was supplying the car design industry, and the car design industry was growing at the time. So people were starting to set up their own studios. So there weren't quite enough car designers coming through. So that meant, when you had your graduation show at Royal College of Art,
that was it.
You had all these big cheeses come in, all these people from, you would have had the ex-RCA students, but they've been people from Porsche, Opel, Toyota, every single company in the world would come to these shows. And as a little kid, you'd get just loads and loads of offers. No matter how good you were, even the rubbish ones would get fantastic offers.
Amazing.
No disrespect to them, and, that you had years like, you look back, people like the 2 Callums, so Murray Callum was in a year below me, and then his brother would have been a year before that, and then they would have had, over in Art Centre about the same time, you would have had Jay Mays coming through, and Chris Bangle, all these guys, all these big names just coming through one after the other, and, so, and then you had this thing where a lot of Brits got top jobs, abroad. So people like Martin Smith, like that, and so a lot of the studios, in Europe were run by Brits as well. You know, there's a huge influx of Brits going over to mainland Europe, and some of my colleagues, people like Ken Melville and Ed James, and some of these guys who'd never even been abroad were suddenly jetting off to Paris, getting their first passports and going to go and work at Citroën or something like that. And so it was a really exciting time, all these studios just starting up and people are starting to find their own feet. And Ford was pretty established in the design world. Ford had a big studio. But places like Citroën and Volkswagen, still pretty tiny operations. So very, very different time.
Fuck, that must have been incredibly exciting. The business for anybody for the first time is exciting, and I think at that period of time, I don't know what would be a good comparison to today, but like maybe like the UX boom. Would you say it's like feels like a similar thing?
Yeah, I guess so. It probably is something like that, or robotics or something like that. It was very much a new thing, like I said, the American studios were more established. The Ford studio I worked at Dunton, which is still there, was modelled on the American one. They made a sort of slightly smaller American studio in Essex, and that was a pretty impressive place. When I went there the first time as an intern from Royal College of Art, I was amazed, to see. That's the first time I would have seen full-size clay. Well, we had full-size clay models at Oga, but not like the scale you got them at Dunton. Wow. And that was just amazing. And I was taken in there as an intern, and sat next to this designer I'd never met, but that was Ian Callum. He was the first. He took me on as my he was my mentor, if you like.
Wow.
He was the first real car designer I met.
Was he? But you said that he was what, the year above you, or?
He would have been. So Murray was a year below me. So Ian would have been. I think I'm not sure how much older he is. I think maybe just 4 years in front of me or something like that. At college. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Something like that.
Fuck, that's amazing. It's. As I said, Jaguar was my first proper OEM job. So for me as well, that was like a huge treat for me. I interned for a startup in South Africa. So that wasn't like a proper car design studio. But I remember there was something so magic about going into Whitley for the first time, and there was a bunch of like, contractors that were, not all of, there was a lot of young people as well, but I remember some of the what you would call a textbook contractor that are a bit like long in the tooth, just counting their hours and saying like, this is so boring, this is bullshit and whatever. And I was like, none of you guys are going to ruin this for me. Like I'm over the moon to be here. So, if you're miserable, piss off, So that must have been a really amazing experience.
Yeah, it was. I think I had an experience very similar to that, because I was at Royal College of Art and I was drawing cars like crazy and really loving it. And then I did go into Ford, and it was a big studio, and there were people like that who were just 9-to-5ers and not really enthusiastic, and it was just a job, and I couldn't really get that. That there were a few people who were more wound up, more exciting, but there were people who just did want to just go home at when it was the knockoff time, and that was it, and they thought it was boring and stuff like that. So that was part of the reason I left Ford, actually. That's because it was. Well, there was exciting stuff going on. It was slow, it was really, really slow. And I used to sit there drawing, and none of my work really, it was just sort of like wallpaper for the studio. I did good stuff, but it was always a bit too crazy and a bit too wild, and it wasn't realistic enough. And, your time will come, and you sit there for a few years, and eventually you'll get to be a real designer. So I then stayed there for 2 years before I moved on.
Was Martin Longmore there the same time as you?
No, he would have been at IAD, I guess. I think. Yeah, he wasn't at the same time as me. He was at IAD then, I think. Yeah.
So Julian, after Ford, did you go straight to Lotus, or was there somewhere in between?
Yeah, I did quite a lot of I did quite a lot of freelance work while I was at Royal College of Art for the tutors. So the tutors all did, Ken Greenlee and John Heffernan and Peter Stevens. They always had little exciting projects in the background going. I used to help them out, and I found that really exciting. And then Peter Stevens did some work for Lotus, and then he was asked to set up a studio there in about 1985. And he asked myself and Simon Cox to go up there and set up this studio. And that was really exciting to me. And I thought, oh, brilliant, this is, it's... these people make James Bond cars, because it was James Bond was Lotus back then. It was, it was doing that, and the whole idea about a really small team working for Lotus and doing cars there was really exciting. So I left that huge studio and went up to Norfolk. And do you know Norfolk very well?
No, I've literally never been there. I did consider going there, but I haven't been, unfortunately.
It's a lovely place now, but it was a bit of a backwater then. There was no dual carriageway in that whole of that county. It was all single roads. There was no stereo radio, for instance. You couldn't buy any milk or food after 5 o'clock there. It was a very it was a different sort of place. And I turned up to work my first day there, and the studio was actually a porter cabin. You know what a porter cabin is? One of those temporary buildings. Yeah. And not a big porter cabin, like a little porter cabin you get at a car park, an NCP car park, And by the time I arrived, the end hadn't been delivered, so it was actually open to the elements at one end. And it was just a little shell of this little temporary building. And I didn't care. I thought it was great. I didn't mind. And all around the place that was a small place, but it was a proper car environment. So lots of sports cars driving around. They'd just been finished a big contract with DeLorean Motors, and there was DeLoreans everywhere as well, and DeLorean shells and DeLorean bits. It's just really exciting, and there's cars whizzing around the test track, and so I loved it. I thought it was really exciting, and we had a lot of fun working there. It was a really good time for me.
I bet. I mean, how does that make you feel then, Julian? Like seeing graduates today that, I mean, again, it's a blanket statement, but I just feel that there's a sense of entitlement that maybe wasn't there 20 years ago. Have you experienced much of that?
Oh God, it's. I mean, you're getting such a big subject there, aren't you? Because it's not just car designers. You could say it's all about you. See, it make me sound old.
No, but I'm making myself sound old as well by bringing that up, and I bring it up all the time. And I it's not to demonize anybody, but it's just to kind of to maybe highlight the perspective a little bit, because as you said, you got there. You were literally in a box that wasn't even closed, but it was the adventure of being part of this small team in this amazing brand at such an exciting time, and you're doing your dream job. So it's just for a bit of perspective, I
don't know. I think it's I think car design is it's a very going to these studios. It's very intimidating for these young guys. You see all this stuff going on. What's to contribute it. You don't really understand how it works and what to do. You've come out of college and you're same as I was. You're full of energy, full of enthusiasm, and you want to make an impact. You've got the freedom in your college to do your projects and realize them and do something. And you probably do. You sometimes go to these places and you can be disappointed sometimes as well. You've got all that energy and you want an outlet for it. So I don't know if they're entitled or not. Some of them are, I guess. I don't know. It's difficult to get recognized in these big studios. If you go to these studios, you've got hundreds and hundreds of designers doing lots and lots of work and all these different mediums and so many activities going on.
Okay.
I think it is difficult to make an impression. Okay. So
I'm trying to. I mean, I'm trying to have a balanced view on it. I mean, you meet different. My experience is up and down all the time. I should probably not focus on the negative so much. I don't get it. I think it's because I struggled so much, and I think when it finally happened, even though it was just as an alias modeler, it was really, really exciting to me, and it was everything at that time, so it's a personal thing for me that I just can't understand that mindset, and that's probably why it comes up too much, but we shouldn't dwell on that. Let's talk about Lotus.
All right.
what was your 3D skills like at that time? Because obviously you had mastered the art of, well, you were more than competent at illustrating your ideas. Was that a challenge for you to translate them into 3D at that stage?
Um, yeah, I guess so. Again, there's no, we've got no CAD at the moment, right? So, again, this is like going back talking about the Bronze Age. So you got to imagine that we're now in an era where it's drawing offices. So you go to an engineering department, right? It's basically a huge room at Ford, you know, full of drafting tables and people drawing on Mylar film, drawing out engineering. That's what I do,
Wow. Yeah.
and as part of that whole process, the print room, the print room is a really vital source of any car design activity or engineering activity, because there's a big print room and it's making these either blueprints or Mylar prints, and they're getting copied by people and modified and taken around backwards and forwards. So the smell of ammonia is lingering in a lot in some of these engineering offices as well, and storage of drawings, there's loads and loads of storage, big racks of rolled up drawings. So it's a very different environment. There's not a computer terminal in sight. Nothing. All right? It's hard to imagine. There's not, you'd be out of a job. There's nothing there. When I was at Ford in I won't do any dates, but I was, we started having
86.
some of the first companies from America starting to come over with computerized systems to do 3D models, and we had they turned up with a model of a Chrysler which they revolved around on a screen, and they said, that's brilliant. How long did it take to make that? And they said, well, we could probably do one of these in 6 weeks. It's a really crude model, just spinning around and we're going, wow, 6 weeks, you can do that, amazing. It's just like a real car. It was really the crappiest model you could imagine, and there's no Photoshop, obviously no Photoshop. I mean, I guess in about 1989, we went to an agency to do some photo retouching on a computer system, which was an early version of Photoshop. And again, we asked them to do a convertible version of a car as just a 2D image, and that took them 2 or 3 days, moving pixels by pixels to take the roof off a car,
Wow.
And it was really, really crude. But anyway, so what experience I would have had there would purely, when I went to Lotus, would have been on just scale models, really, just doing scale models. So very similar to what I did at college, really. It only would have been when I went to Lotus, I would have started on full-size models, and I would have done stuff on Lotus Esprit, things like bits, front bumpers, wheels, things like that initially, and that's where I would have get started on it. But just purely everything's in clay, working clay modelers.
So it was literally like clay, like there would be bucks, and they would clay up everything by hand, no milling, nothing. Everything
would milling. What are you talking about, milling? No. No, you had everything was just done on, we had measuring machines and steeplemeyers and stuff like that, but it would have been everything done manually. And then comes the next problem is at the moment I think there's a good bridge between designer doing some rudimentary modeling, alias guy, clay modeler. There's all these links in there, but then it was just designer and clay modeler, right? And so you have to go and tell the clay modeler what you want exactly. So you had to give him sections, you had to give him bits and pieces like that, But there's no, and that I found that very, very difficult. That is that for designers, that is a baptism of fire to go and talk to some of these brutish, hairy modelers, and
gazers.
Yeah, and that's pretty scary as a young guy, because they do take advantage of you. So the whole modeler thing it remains quite a baptism of fire for young designers. The first time they really work with clay modelers and get stuck in there and get the right pace and how to communicate with them. But it's exactly the same, probably more so because your 3D knowledge is even less really back then.
But I guess are you obviously doing all the preparation you can before you go and speak to one of those guys? I mean, in terms of thinking clearly about what it is that you actually want to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, we did obviously we did full size tapes, so we did sections and did full size tapes. Depending on the company, depended how you would actually how rough you're allowed to model, and depending on the model and depending on what job. But we used to do lots and lots of full size tapes. That was really the thing. And that's a particular skill which is sort of lost now, which is a bit of a shame though, because it is a really nice way to do things and a nice way to understand form and shape. And we take really extreme examples. When we at Lotus we did work for Honda as well. We did lots of consultancy work. So when you did a job for Honda, they used to I'm not sure they still do this, but you'd do a tape drawing in end view, side view, and plan view, and they all had to match, and that's a real pain to actually get a line and match it, make sure it's the same in all three dimensions by working between three drawings. You had to do that.
Sorry, I've got a bug on my microphone. Fuck. Sorry. Okay, carry on.
And then anyway, then the modeler would then take all the intersection lines, and he'd put those in space in brass wires, right?
Fuck.
And then they'd put clay in between the brass wires. And then when you wanted to change something, you had to go and change all three drawings, plan, end, side view. Then they'd move that brass wire and then move all the surfaces into it. It's so difficult. Wow. So difficult. That's how they used to work.
You know what? When I first, because I couldn't really use Alias at all at university, and I ended up doing this course. And we had a great instructor, and the project that we had to do was the Audi TT, and everybody did it at that time. That was like a thing, and it was also when he was telling us, explaining to us how we would create our own designs in Alias. It was very much that process, obviously in digital, but still it was like, making sure that everything matched up in all three views. And that, on the one hand, it's like it's a very good exercise in terms of kind of establishing some clarity in your mind as to what you want to achieve, but at the same time, it can be so limiting in terms of realizing something that maybe you haven't thought of, which is also okay. But it's so much is born out of those spontaneous ideas that present themselves when without any pre-planning. So that must have been incredibly difficult in physical.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't recommend working like that. That's just how Honda worked at the time. One particular project we did for them, but that was crazy.
So Julian, is that where you did the Civic and the Isuzu concept as well, or are these completely different time frames?
No, Lotus was built up of two. It was a car company, made cars, but it also had an engineering consultancy, and that was it. The intended, I believe it still does that now. And the engineering consultancy was sometimes much bigger than the car company, and vice versa. In the 80s, it did all the engines, for instance, for GM in Europe. It did something ridiculous, like a quarter of all the engines in all the cars sold in Germany were designed by Lotus. Something ridiculous. They made loads and loads of engines for Opel. So they did things, stuff like that, and we were owned by Lotus, were owned by GM at the time as well. So we did lots of work for GM. The Isuzu came about because Isuzu was part of GM as well. So we got approached by Isuzu to develop a car. It was when Lexus and Infiniti were doing their first luxury cars with V8s in them, and Isuzu had a V8 engine as well, and they wanted to showcase this car. So they came to us to build this show car for them. And that was with Shiro Nakamura, who was later vice president of design for Nissan. And we had a great time doing this car because we had so much. We did this car over 18 months for a show car. That's unheard of, So we did loads and loads of beautiful drawings and renderings, and Simon did a fantastic interior for it. Shiro was overseeing it, and it's just basically us three doing this car, and it was really, really fun doing that. It was all modelled in the UK, all modelled manually. I did loads and loads of full-size airbrush renderings. So I would literally we had another porter cabin, which we made, which was, I'd stretch out a big sheet of Mylar, and I'd be doing tape drawings, but then I'd have car aerosol paint, and then I'd be painting them with car aerosol paint, and then I'd be using an airbrush as well, like an airbrush and a compressor, and coloured tapes, and I would turn out maybe one full-size rendering a day.
Jesus.
And then I got on a flight to Tokyo with, I think, 11, 12 full-size airbrush renderings, which I then put up in the studio in Japan. Big, massive drawings of concept cars. I mean, that's, and you're using you're using these really toxic inks, you're using this stuff called Flowmaster, which is a special ink, which you used to use in your drawings, but you could also use it for doing those big swirly backgrounds. So you just basically, you'd get a big swab about this long, cover it in cotton pads, spray ink all over it, and then you just down the wall like this, making these big backgrounds.
Wow.
And, and you'd go home at night and you'd blow your nose and it'd just come out blue or red, but what have you been doing,
Red? Oh my God.
So much ink. It was really bad. But, it's proper, really hard physical stuff when you see guys sitting around those little terminals doing drawings. They don't know. They don't know the pain we guys had to go through to do those big renderings. But it was, imagine, doing those in the studio now. And just the mess you made, the mess and the paint on the floor and stuff like that, and just feeling physically tired from drawing. It was really exciting.
That's really, really exciting. I mean, the closest experience I had to that was probably at college in Guildford, actually, where we were forced to do different. We had to do different subjects. So we did like a 3D sculpture stuff. We did printmaking and screen printing and fashion and sewing and all sorts of stuff. And I loved it. And I have to say that you talking about that kind of reminds me of that period. So that must have been incredible.
Yeah, no, it was really, really fun. I mean, this was a really backwater studio. A lot of the time we were still in temporary buildings, we were in porter cabins and stuff like that. We would use facilities in Coventry, some of the ones which are still there, to build our concept car. But building that concept car was brilliant. That was one of the most exciting things one of my true highlights of my career, doing that car. It was fantastic. Brilliant.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, your the Honda that you did, was that was a lot later?
Yeah, the Honda we did. I guess we did. We did loads and loads of freelance work for all sorts of people. We did work for Chris Bangle at BMW. We did a lot of work for Honda. We did a lot of work for Saab. A lot of work for Opel. What else did we do? The Korean companies like Daewoo we did, and Nissan. We did lots of freelance work here and there, little jobs all the time. And then we did stuff for Honda as well. So for the studio in Offenbach. Is that still there? It's still there, isn't it?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
So we used to go over there, and we used to do these sketch programs, and then we used to make scale models for them and send them over. And we did a model there with, I think it was Steve Crin's model. It might have been my drawing. I don't know. It was Steve Crin's and me. We did this, and Russell was involved as well. And we did this, did some Honda models. And one of those apparently was for a little 3-door Civic. And I didn't realize for years later, but at the time, do you remember Sandy Boys?
Yes, he worked for Honda, right?
Yeah, he worked for Honda. So he worked for Honda, and he told me when I went to JLR years later on, he said that, your model got picked and sent to Japan, and that became the Honda bread van, the EP3.
Oh, wow.
So I never knew. So I very soon I went and bought one after that, because so I still have one. I still have one now. So
incredible. And and with regards to Lotus projects, you did the you worked on the S4. The
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we did. I mean, the Esprit was a great car, but that company never had any investment. I stayed at Lotus for years, just waiting to do a sports car, waiting to do a sports car, and that was really the thing I wanted to do. So it was fun. The consultancy side was pretty wearing because I'd go to a motor show and I was always trying to hustle for a job, trying to go around and find work and take work of studios. Ian Callum was at TWR and he was doing the same thing. So often we'd end up competing for the same job, both trying to get the same thing. And whether you're selling, solar panels to someone's house or double glazing, or you're selling car design, you're still an annoying salesperson.
Yeah.
And I didn't enjoy that part of the job. I hated doing all that. I wanted to do the Lotus cars. That's the most important thing for me. So we did lots of work on the Esprit, lots and lots of different versions, and that was sort of fun. And what the car I really waited around for all these years was doing the Elise.
Yes.
I always wanted to do a car, and that was a fantastic project. That was worth waiting for.
Was there was there any internal conflict with regards to everybody wanting to do it?
Well, that was a painful thing, really, because we'd started work on the Elise, and we'd done the previous car to the Elise had been the Lotus Elan, front-wheel drive Lotus Elan, which hadn't been particularly successful. And a lot of the people at Lotus didn't really want to do another car, but just the diehards got together. Particularly myself and my best friend Richard Rackham, we did the chassis. And we did this very, very back to basics, very purist car, which was really exciting. And the technology behind it with the extruded aluminium chassis was very special as well. And at that time, as we were putting that car together, we got bought by Bugatti. And obviously that was run by Romano Artioli, Italian industrialist. And the way a lot of the Italian car companies, so the Italian design industry was still up and running pretty healthily in those days still. It was starting to shrink and it was starting to struggle a bit. But what all the Italian design houses did is that they pretty much did design work at cost or even for free. So they got the body engineering work later on, all the tooling work, all the big stuff. That's what they wanted to do. So their design departments were subsidized somewhat. And when they did the first Bugatti, the EB110, a lot of the design houses would have done design proposals for free. And so here am I at Lotus, we're doing our sports car, we think, last year we're going to get this thing done, And then suddenly this big, this crate arrives, in design. We're in a proper building by this point, finally. So this big crate arrives, and we open it up, and it's full of drawings, just piles and piles of renderings, and we're told it's all the Italian design houses have contributed to this new Lotus car. And of course, you English guys, they can't design cars. What are you talking about? Italians design cars. And so going to put these all up on the wall, and we're going to choose the winning design, and you can be entrant number 8, So, and that's what we had to do. And suddenly, here, so I'd been waiting around for, 7-8 years at this point to just finally do a Lotus, and suddenly have this threat of all these Italian design houses, and they put them all up on the wall, and some of them are pretty good, I've got to say. And then some big names like Fioravante, Idea, who else was in there? Lots and lots of big Italian design houses had taken part. But luckily, they actually picked our car. So that was. I mean, we were more progressed, I guess, and ours was the best, of course, as well. And they went, and I think we were free as well. They chose us. So, and that started off the Elise, and it started off a very nice relationship I had with Romano Artioli, the founder of Bugatti, back then, and I'm still sort of friends with him now and his family now, and it's a very wild and crazy time with a very vigorous seat of the pants boss, doing the Elise was a great project. What was so great about the Elise was, it was a car. Myself and Richard Rackham, and the team, we designed that for ourselves. I think if you actually, everyone has a dream of designing their own car, and thinks if I could do my own car, I'd do it like this. If I didn't have to listen to all these people, all these marketing people, I'd do it like this. And I think that's as close as I've ever got to designing something which was really, what I wanted to be at the time. And then, I was young and I was agile. I didn't have any back problems. I didn't care. It was difficult to get into this thing, and no one seemed to mind either, And the car didn't have any carpets in it. The original didn't have any roof. It was just a really crude little toy, And I was into motorcycles a lot at the time as well. And I wanted a motorcycle type car. So we did this very, very purist vehicle, which I think part of its popularity now is that it is just so singular in its intention and what it's trying to do, and it's not for everyone. It's clearly only for a very, very small proportion of the public who want that sort of thing. And if you can ever have a creative process where you do something which you so clearly believe in with friends who want to do the same thing, and with friends who are engineers as well, and want to do the same thing, and they respect your discipline, you respect theirs, that's when you can do something really, really special and really, really exciting. So that's what the Elise became for us.
Jesus, that's amazing. Was Peter Stevens still there at that time, or had he left?
No, he'd left. He'd gone to do the McLaren F1 at this point.
Okay. And so were you at the helm then? Were you the big geezer?
Yeah, I was, yeah.
And
when I would say at the helm, it wasn't really there's only a handful of us really there. Russell was there, and who else was there? David Brisbane did the interior. Andrew Hill, was the guy who did all the hard work feeding the car out. But it was a small team and a small team of modelers, it was really fun, really great.
Wow, would you say that that's one of your favorite projects?
Yeah, I think it's got to be pretty much my favorite. It's so many people like the car, and it's 25 years old this year. And I had someone ring up yesterday to another magazine wants to do another article about it. People really, really like the thing. I guess it is a bit of a design icon. The car itself, is so different in time. People like it, and it stands for something. It stands for something, different and original. And we had a lot of fun doing it. And the design guys at Lotus, Russell Carr, they have a meeting room named after me. They had the Thomson room, and that is so nice of them, so sweet of them to do that. To actually another design operation to actually recognize another designer in there who doesn't work there anymore and just who's still alive as well.
Well, so that doesn't. Yeah, that's not really commonplace nowadays, is it?
No.
Everyone stepping on each other to get what they need. So
yeah. So it's a lot of fondness. It's a very characterful product. It's a lot of fun. It just speaks of a very sort of liberated, just a really nice project to do.
And so also at that age as well, Julian, that's also, there's probably a lot to be said for that as well.
Yeah, it was, when it was just at a particular time. I couldn't design a car like that now, because I don't think it wouldn't be truly honest, because I wouldn't really truly believe in it now. I have one now and I like it, but it's a very difficult thing for me to use and own, I think it's a very crude little device. But it's that's its attraction, and it was fitting for me at the time, and the people who bought it, they loved it.
I think they're great as well. I'm too overweight to get in and out of one now, but I remember Carl had one, right, when we were at Whitley, and I literally had to kind of crawl over on my hands to get out of the car, and I was a lot lighter then, so. Yeah. Yeah, but it was, when you're driving in it, it's just like, it is like a go-kart. It is literally like a well-balanced go-kart.
No, a lot of design talent because Ted Manafelt, you remember, he had one as well, and
Yes.
Patrice, he has one at the moment. Who else? Claudia, I think she's still got one as well, hasn't she?
I
So there's
think
all
I
these,
think so. I don't know. Yeah.
yeah. So there's all, it's still, it is a bit of a designer's favorite. It's really cool.